Queen Mary I, born 1516, died 1558. Mary was the lone offspring of Henry VIII and Catherine of Aragon to live past outset. Delegated after the passing of Edward VI and the expulsion of the 9 Days Queen Lady Jane Grey, Mary is mainly associated with briefly and brutally returning England to Catholicism. Numerous conspicuous Protestants were executed for their convictions, prompting the moniker, "cocktail." Dreading the scaffold, a further 800 Protestants left the nation, unfit to return until her passing. It ought to be noticed that Elizabeth I shares position 10 on this rundown for her similarly awful conduct. Myra Hindley, born 1942, died 2002. Myra Hindley and Ian Brady were liable for the Fields murders, happening in the Manchester region of Britain in the mid-1960s. Together, these two beasts were answerable for the capturing, sexual maltreatment, torment and murder of 3 kids younger than 12 and 2 adolescents, matured 16 and 17. A key found in Myra's ownership prompted implicating proof put away at a left-gear warehouse at Manchester Central Station. The proof incorporated a copying of one of the homicide casualties shouting as Hindley and Brady assaulted and tormented her. In the last days before detainment, she built up a strut and presumptuous disposition that turned into her trademark. Police Secretary Sandra Wilkinson has always remembered seeing Hindley and her mom Nellie inclining toward the town hall eating desserts. While the mother was clearly unnaturally agitated, Hindley appeared to be uninterested and unfeeling of her circumstance. Isabella of Castile, born 1451, died 1504. Isabella I of Spain, notable as the benefactor of Christopher Columbus with her better half Ferdinand II of Aragon, are liable for making conceivable the unification of Spain under their grandson Carlos I. As a major aspect of the drive for unification, Isabella designated Tomás de Torquemada as the primary Inquisitor General of the investigation. Walk 31, 1492 imprints the usage of the Alhambra Decree. Ejection orders constraining the evacuation or transformation of Jews and Muslims. Around 200,000 individuals left Spain. Those residual who picked transformation were in this manner mistreated by the examination exploring Judaizing conversos. In 1974, Pope Paul VI opened her motivation for beatification. This places her on the way toward conceivable sainthood. In the Catholic Church, she is along these lines titled Servant of God. Beverly Allitt, born 1968, the heavenly attendant of death. Beverly Gale Allitt is one of Britain's most notable sequential executioners, filling in as a pediatric medical attendant. She is answerable for the homicide of 4 kids and the genuine injury of 5 others in her consideration. At the point when accessible, insulin or potassium infusions were utilized to accelerate heart failure. Covering got the job done when they were definitely not. In spite of the fact that sentenced with death or injury in 9 cases, Allitt assaulted 13 youngsters over a 50 multi-day time span before being caught in the act. Allitt has never talked about the intention in her violations. However, Munchausen syndrome by proxy clarifies her activities. This begging to be proven wrong character issue includes an example of misuse or mischief to somebody in your consideration so as to collect consideration. Allitt was known as a kid to wear gauzes in throws over injuries, yet would not permit them to be inspected. Beauty Gunness, born 1859, died 1931. Beauty Gunness was one of America's generally degenerate and profitable female sequential executioners. Standing 6 feet (1.83 meters) tall and tipping the scales at more than 200 pounds (91 kilograms), she was a forcing and influential lady of Norwegian drop. Almost certainly, she killed both her spouses and every last bit of her youngsters at various occasions. However, it is sure that she killed a large portion of her admirers' beaux, and her 2 girls Myrtle and Lucy. The thought process was insatiability, straightforward as can be. Extra security arrangements and resources taken or cheated from her admirers turned into her wellspring of salary. Most reports put her loss of life at in excess of 20 casualties, more than quite a few years, with some asserting more than 100 irregularities during her after-death assessment. The body was accounted for to be 2 inches shorter than Bell's 6 feet. Prepared for bell guns to enter American criminal fables. A female blue bear. Mary Ann Cotton, born 1832, died 1873. Englishwoman Mary Ann Cotton is another revenue-driven sequential executioner, originating before bell guns by 30 years. Hitched at age 20 to William Mowbray, the lovebirds settled in Plymouth, Devon, to begin their family. The couple had 5 youngsters, 4 of whom passed on of gastric fever and stomach torments. Moving back toward the northeast, disaster appeared to tail them. 3 additional kids conceived. 3 additional kids kicked the bucket. William before long followed his posterity, biting the dust of an intestinal confusion in January 1865. English Prudential speedily delivered a £35 profit, and an example was set up. Her subsequent spouse, George Ward, kicked the bucket of intestinal issues just as one of her 2 outstanding youngsters. The intensity of the press constantly a power to be dealt with found Mary Ann. The neighborhood papers found that as Mary Ann moved around northern England, she lost 3 spouses, a darling, a companion, her mom, and 12 youngsters, all perishing of stomach fever. She was hanged at Durham County Jail, March 24, 1873, for homicide by arsenic harming. She kicked the bucket gradually, the executioner utilizing too short a drop for a spotless execution. Ilse Koch, born 1906, died 1967, bite the dust. Hexa von Buchenwald, the Witch of Buchenwald, or Buchenwalder Slamp. The Bitch of Buchenwald was the spouse of Karl Koch, commandant of the inhumane imprisonments Buchenwald from 1937 to 1941, and Majdanek from 1941 to 1943. Smashed on the total force rendered by her significant other. She delighted in torment and vulgarity. Notorious for her trinkets, tattoos taken from the killed detainees, her notoriety for lewdness was all around earned. In the wake of building an indoor games field in 1940, with 250,000 imprints taken from detainees, Ilse was elevated to Oberofficer and boss supervisor of the couple of female watchmen at Buchenwald. She ended it all by hanging herself at Eichach-Lades jail on September 1, 1967. Irma Gries, born 1923, died 1945. Another result of the Nazis' last arrangement, Irma Grieser, the Bitch of Belsen, was a watchman at inhumane imprisonments Ravensbrück, Auschwitz, and Bergen-Belsen. Moved to Auschwitz in 1943, she more likely than not demonstrated specific excitement and commitment to the activity. She was elevated to senior supervisor, the second most noteworthy positioning female in camp before the year's over. Responsible for more than 30,000 Jewish female detainees, she delighted in her work. Her work included savaging of detainees by her prepared and half-starved mutts, sexual abundances, self-assertive shootings, perverted beatings with a plated whip, and choosing detainees for the gas chamber. She appreciated both physical and enthusiastic torment, and routinely wore substantial boots and conveyed a gun to encourage both. Catherine Knight, born 1956, the main Australian lady to be condemned to a characteristic life term without any chance to appeal. Catherine Knight had a past filled with brutality. Seeing someone, she squashed the false teeth of one of her exes and sliced the throat of another spouse's 8-week-old little dog before his eyes. A warmed relationship with John Charles Thomas Price became open information with an apprehended violence order that Price had recorded against Knight, and finished with Knight wounding Price to death with a butcher's blade. He had been cut in any event multiple times, both front and back, with a considerable lot of the injuries entering indispensable organs. She at that point cleaned him and hung his suit from the door jamb in the lounge room, removed his head and put it in the soup pot, heated his hindquarters, and arranged sauce and vegetables to go with the cook. The dinner and a noxious note were set out for the kids, fortunately found by police before they showed up home. Elizabeth Báthory, born 1560, died 1614. Royal Lady Elizabeth Báthory is viewed as the most scandalous sequential executioner in Hungarian and Slovak history. Gossipy tidbits had circled for a considerable length of time about missing worker young ladies, offered generously compensated work at the manor. They were gone forever. One of these bits of gossip arrived at the ears of King Matthias II, who sent a gathering of men to the enormous castle Csev. The men discovered one young lady dead and one biting the dust. Another was discovered injured and others bolted up. Depicted abominations gathered from declaration of witnesses incorporate extreme beatings over broadened time frames, the utilization of needles, consuming or mutilation of hands, some of the time additionally of appearances and genitalia, gnawing the substance off the faces, arms and other substantial parts, and the destitute of casualties. The casualty all-out is thought to number in the hundreds, happening over a quarter-century time span. Because of her economic well-being, she was never brought to preliminary, however, stayed under house capture in a solitary room until her passing. The possibility that the Countess washed in the blood of her casualties is fables, and one of only a handful, hardly anything she didn't do.